Prince Philip to the Lord. Any human, regardless of what they do, I mean, Adolf Hitler could have got saved. God can forgive you. But we need to be careful to distinguish who the enemy is, and it's Satan, okay? It's not these people. In order to stabilize world population, we need to eliminate 350,000 people a day, Jacques Cousteau said. Something's wrong with his philosophy. Huh. John D. Rockefeller believed in evolution, but he applied it to the business world. And you will not understand the history of the 1800s until you see how the evolution philosophy ties in. These guys that developed their big monopolies, we finally had to get the trust busters and the unions and the child labor laws and all that kind of stuff. It all comes back to a basic philosophy of right and wrong based on, are there absolute rights come from God? Or is it the strongest survive? You won't understand what happened with Rockefeller and Carnegie and all those industrial giants until you see how their philosophy was affected by Charles Darwin. Go back and read about him with that in mind. See what you think. Theodore Roosevelt was greatly affected by this philosophy of evolution. When Roosevelt was president, he said all sorts of things that really ought to make you sit up and say, wait a minute, what's the matter with this guy? Roosevelt was probably a Christian. I don't know if he was or wasn't, but he probably was. Probably in heaven right now. But Roosevelt had a bad philosophy. He was influenced by Charlie Darwin. Roosevelt said, I wish very much that the wrong people could be prevented entirely from breeding. Who's the wrong people, Teddy? All these inferiors. He thought that the immigrants from Europe, Scotland, Ireland, and the Orient are a threat to American society. How many of you have ancestors from one of them places? Inferior. You ever wonder what happened and why it happened to the Indians in the late 1800s? Why were the white people so cruel and break all their treaties with the Indians? Why? Well, you see, many of our people back in this time, even good godly people, had a bad philosophy. They were influenced by evolution. That's why in 1871, Congress scrapped all treaties with the Indians and moved them off to the reservations. You want to read a story that'll break your heart, you ought to read about the Trail of Tears and see what happened to the Cherokee Nation. They were marched out of their property 2 weeks before harvest time, by the way. So the people who came in and took over their land had crops already ready to go. Chattanooga, Tennessee was named, used to be Ross's Landing or Rossville or something like that, after Chief Ross. Moved all the Indians out, had to give it a new name. Renamed the city so people would forget. But I haven't forgotten. 1/3 of the Cherokees died along the way to Oklahoma. Trail of Tears. Read about that. Why did they do that? Well, you see, if you believe the Indians are inferior, they haven't evolved as far, that's normal. It's natural thinking, isn't it? But if you believe God's Word that says all nations are of one blood, Acts chapter 17, well then, everybody's equal in God's sight. And we're all descended from Adam, right? See, it's a philosophical difference that makes a big difference in how you behave. Your belief determines your behavior. That's why they did to the Indians what they did. You might have heard of Benito Mussolini, dictator from Italy. You know, he believed in evolution. Ooh, big time. And he thought the Italians were superior. They went down to Ethiopia and slaughtered the Ethiopians because they were black. They haven't evolved as far. They're just black people. They went down with their tanks and machine guns and airplanes and fought against the Ethiopians with their shields and spears. There's a slaughter. You might have heard of Adolf Hitler. Family name used to be Schicklgruber, but he couldn't spell that in kindergarten, so they changed it to Hitler. Hitler's philosophy was all messed up because of Darwin and other folks at that time, and the offspring of Darwin, like Nietzsche, who thought the German super race was the one, you know, Superman. Hitler thought about that. Hitler wrote this book, Mein Kampf. You ought to read this book, folks, to see what's this guy thinking. In this book, Hitler talked over, I could show you hundreds of quotes from that book. Hitler talked about nature does not desire the blending of a higher with a lower race. Who's a higher race, Adolf? He talked about the Aryan blood. You ever heard of that, the Aryans? Aryan nation? Still very active today, by the way. Racial crossing. I mean, the whole book is full of racism. I was in New Hampshire preaching up there, and I went to Keene State University to visit their library. They got a great library, a whole bunch of books about Hitler and the Holocaust. I read about a book a month about Hitler and the Holocaust, just to keep my blood boiling. I just read one 4 days ago. Hitler's Cross. Tremendous book by Lutzer from Moody Bible Institute. Erwin Lutzer wrote this. Great book. I went to the library, and they've got a whole section of books, about half as big as this room, on nothing but Hitler and the Holocaust. I asked the librarian, I said, "Sir, can you answer a question for me about Hitler?" He said, "Well, I'll try. I've studied this for years and years and years." I said, "Why did Hitler kill the Jews? Why not somebody else?" "Well, he killed lots of folks, but why did he hate Jews?" He said, "Oh, that's an easy question. Hitler believed in evolution. He had a list he was going on. The Jews were at the bottom of the list." I said, "Could you show me the list?" He said, "Oh, yeah, sure. It's on the orange poster on the table back there, far right-hand end. Here's Hitler's list." He said the Nordic, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, were close to pure Aryan. Did you catch that? Blonde hair, blue-eyed, Norwegian. Thank you, thank you. Close to pure Aryan. The Germans, predominantly Aryan. The Mediterraneans, slightly Aryan. Slavics, half Aryan, half ape. This is the list he used. Orientals, you know, Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, slightly ape. Black Africans, predominantly ape. Jewish, close to pure ape. Why? Hitler killed the Jews because he believed the Jews hadn't evolved as far. If he'd have killed all the Jews, he made a good start on it, by the way, guess who would have been next? Hitler hated black people. Does anybody know where the Olympics were held in 1936? Berlin, Germany. Guess who won the most gold medals? Jesse Owens, the black American athlete. Hitler was so angry he walked out of the stadium. He said, "This is not fair to make my humans race against this black." Excuse me? That was the Mormon church religion too, or philosophy, by the way, for quite a while, until they discovered the blacks can play basketball for BYU. So the Mormon church is founded on the philosophy of evolution. Ye shall be as gods. If you're a good Mormon, you get to go off and start your own universe someday and be a god. If you're a good Mormon wife, you get to go to heaven and be eternally pregnant, producing spirit babies. My wife don't want to go. Staying right here, forget it. What's the problem with these guys? Hitler, his philosophy was evolution. He slaughtered the Jews. Matter of fact, he offered to send them out first. 1938. He said, "Who wants the Jews? I'll send them to you. I'll give them to you on luxury ships." President Roosevelt refused to take them. Did you know they could have been saved? But nearly every other country except Sweden refused to take them in. What happened? Well, there was a climate of racism about that time. You might want to go back and read the immigration quotas from the 1930s in America. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, come on in. Jewish, no, sorry. Only a few thousand a year can come in. Folks, it was racism that motivated that. So they began killing them. Just a few at first, and then by the thousands, and then by the millions. You know, they built chambers and gas chambers and concentration camps. I'm telling you, I read a book a month about this, okay? My head's full of this kind of stuff. Suppose somebody in Germany would have gone around speaking in 1937 and said, "Hey, did you know they're building concentration camps out here?" People would have thought they were crazy, wouldn't they? Yeah. Well, guess what, folks? They're building concentration camps in America. Yeah, they are. And I know a lot about that stuff. But I want to give you a different slant to it tonight. So Hitler killed the Jews. They baked them to make grease for their tanks. They shaved the heads to make socks for their submarine crew. Piled up the bodies in great heaps. Ground the bones up for fertilizer for their fields. Why? Well, Hitler's philosophy was wrong. How did he do that? Oh, it's pretty slick. He started with his young people. Hitler's young people. He knew you reached the young, and pretty soon you got the whole world. We'll take a real fast break here, and then we'll cover how he did what he did to Germany, and how they're doing what they're going to do here to America. It's already started, folks. Matter of fact, it's almost too late already. And what should we do about it? We'll see about that in a second.